Oh, there we go, everybody, and welcome to the fourth PR measurement report. And thanks, I think, firstly, I got to say thanks to all the respondents that every year they actually put the effort into, um, doing the survey. So, guys, we couldn't do the survey we couldn't do this report without you guys. So, thank you very much. And also to our respondents, our panel, Tertia, who has been our partner on this for the last 4 years. And I think this year we've made a slight change to the report in that not only do we have our normal questionnaire that has gone out, but she's gone out and actually done some face-to-face surveys so that we can get a little bit more in depth and make this survey much more qualitative as well. So there's some really nice results from the face-to-face surveys that Tertia did. Lebo, thanks. She runs a PR company called PR Powerhouse. She's got 7,400 followers on LinkedIn. Doesn't like to follow me, that's okay. I don't take it personally. No, I'm joking, Lebo. But yeah, thank you very much. I think those of you who don't follow Lebo on LinkedIn, just follow her. Press that click and follow. She got some really nice insights at the end of the day. And finally, Steph. Steph has been a friend of Ornico's for a long time. I've met her. She's a seriously out-of-the-box thinker. Wherever I love engaging with her wherever we are around the world, that we debate a lot of issues, not only about PR, but about many other things that's happening around the world. And it's really interesting to have those conversations. So there's a second time she's with us in terms of the PR measurement report. And it's really cool to have her. So Steph, thank you very much again for joining us, and it's really a pleasure. I know it's really early that we got you up in London, but at least you're fresh and up and ready to give us those cool insights. Another thing about Steph is I think, and I could be mistaken, but I don't think so, she's probably a person that's won more AMIC measurement awards than anyone else. Yes, maybe a lot of them are through companies that she's actually helped, brand intelligence and media intelligence companies such as Ornico. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, you've won more awards around there. So it will really help the South African industry benchmark itself. And that's why it's cool to have Steph here, to benchmark ourselves against the best of the best globally. So Steph, thanks for being one of our panelists. Okay, so before we actually get into this study, and I'll hand over to Tertia, I think just a little personal story. About 12 years ago, we decided to have a couple of events, Joburg and Cape Town, and have an event around measurement. And we had these events, 2 events, and we had both brands and PR companies attended. And no matter how much I try to speak about measurement, everybody was talking to me about AVEs and how do we measure AVEs and how do we get to those figures. And no matter what I try to do, is I just got kind of backlash, and it was all about AVEs. So what we decided to do was then just actually try and meet with some brands and agencies that were really interested in how do we measure. And I did it at the Slow Lounge in Johannesburg. I got 3 people attending, but it was really cool. At least those 3 people were really passionate about how do we measure and how do we take it forward. And it was an interesting conversation. We spent about 3 hours around the measurement, the framework that AMIC has done. And it was really interesting. And now when we look at the survey, and Tertia will go to it in much deeper, there's 60% of people that actually look at measurement, PR practitioners and the respondents. So it's really shifted dramatically. And really, wherever I go, no matter I go and see agencies, when I go and see brands, I really see the shift in understanding and really having these workshops around measurement, and there's more interest around measurement. I think the guys that are really falling a little bit behind are the government and NGOs and those and those players, but there are still some of those guys that actually have moved on it, but we need to look through that. I also think measurement helps us around strategy. You know, strategy wins always. Strategy is the most important part that we need to play as communicators. And you can't do the so what if you don't know what you're measuring. So we have 60 articles in this publication, 35 in that publication. That's great. So what? And I think that's the important issue. So we'll go into those questions. Please, guys, put down your questions. We've got some incredible people on this panel that can answer your questions around measurement. So put it in the chat, and we'll answer those questions as best we can. So without further ado, Tertia, take us through the survey, what it means strategically, what are the insights that we get, and how do we can benchmark against the best globally?
Thank you, Racy. Looking forward to this one. This was a very interesting year for measurement evaluation in South Africa. We'll see that now. So just a quick introduction about the data itself and how we collected data. This is the 4th year that we've been conducting this study. This is the only study of its kind in South Africa, definitely. Most likely in Africa. Rusty, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm not aware of any similar study in Africa that has run for as wide as ours do and as long as ours do. So very proud. And again, thank you to every single respondent that took the time to actually contribute to this data, because it is so important to allow us to enter the global conversations and pitch ourselves against the global benchmarks every single year. So this report really looks at 5 critical levels to look at this practice-based snapshot of what's going on in PR and PR measurement this year. So first off, obviously, we're looking at our practitioner and our practice demographics. It's stock standard. Next, very importantly, we're looking at the practitioner roles. What are South African PR practitioners and comms practitioners actually doing with their time and day in and day out? We're looking at measurement and evaluation practices. Then we're looking at measurement maturity. Of course, when all is said and done, you have to report on what you have measured. So we're looking at reporting. And then our very exciting part since last year of the study is the use of AI in PR. That is the dimensions that we are looking at and the metrics that we're going to explore in this report. So sit back and relax. I'm going to take us through the highlights. First, our practitioner demographic profile. This is always very interesting to see in South Africa. We are a female-dominated public relations industry and comms industry in South Africa. Last year, 71% female. This year, 71% female. Our age profile for our practitioners, just look at that. The vast majority, 46 to 50 years old, 56 to 60 years old, 51 to 55-year-old. Our practitioners are experienced, they are mature, they know what they are doing. This is one of the best things about PR practice in Africa, is that we really have the cream of the crop, which is why we need to get our data and our information out into the global stage. Right. And we're going to see this continuing. I'll get to that in a second, but just the types of work. Agencies, still the most popular. Freelancers, ever present. In-house practitioners, right up there. Other, that's your consultants and people who identify a bit differently. They're also represented. So we have very nice representation as a whole of the industry in our report, in our report's respondents. Size of teams, small teams. Keeping it intimate. 1 to 5 is vast majority, 6 to 10. That's where South African agencies and PR consultancies are happy. Small teams, and we'll see that spilling over into the work we're doing. Years of experience, 21 years, 16 to 20 years, 6 to 10 years. We have these amazingly experienced professionals speaking through this data. Highest level of qualification always blows me away. Postgraduate degrees, 34%. Formal degree, 32%. So we have people who are experienced because they are in the older range. They're experienced. They've been around the block. They are well educated. They work in established agencies. and they have small teams. That's the people speaking through this data. Reporting lines, very important for strategy, as Oresti mentioned. We're still very much reporting to marketing, something we might need to work on and educate a bit around, but a lot reporting to marketing, but happily a lot reporting to the CEO, the president, the managing director, straight to where the strategic decisions are made. Super happy with that. Now, practitioner roles. Why is this important? Okay. For practitioner roles, we're going to look at two things. What level of strategic access do you have, and what do you do on the daily? The first is your level of strategic access. Without strategic access, you cannot add value, because the value that you add in communications is that alignment between strategy, the business goals, and the PR goals, the communication goals, and getting those two to talk together so that the comms goals support the business in reaching their goals. If you have no idea what the business goals are because you don't have strategic access, there's no way you are going to add that value that you are supposed to be added. It can only be unlocked once the PR practitioner is able to align the communication goals with the overall goals of the business. That's the important part. Okay, let's look. Strategic access, 36-ish, neutral. At least we can see the vast majority of people, okay, neutral, strongly agree, say yes, we are likely to be included in meetings or sessions where strategic decisions about the organization is being made. Lebu, I think you must make a note at this point so that we can come from your perspective, come back to this talking point after the data. Right. Okay, so it's looking good on this front. If strategic access is a starting point to measurement, to alignment, adding value, measurement, reporting, then we're starting from a very solid place in South Africa at this point. Second thing, we're looking at the role of the practitioner. What do you do on the daily? Now, we know every year we say this, there has been 3 well-established roles of the PR practitioner. The technical role is execution level performance. They draft the communication pieces, they publish the content, they execute the prescribed plan. All right, they are the doers, the foot soldiers. Next, we have the managerial role. They are tasked with planning the PR activities and campaigns and ensuring the execution of it is done well. So management is in the middle. And lastly, we have the strategist role. That is your executive level function that's responsible for the strategic goal alignment. So they must have that seat at the table and make sure the business goals and the communication goals always gel, and that the communication goals supporting the business goals flows through down to execution level. Okay, those are the 3 roles. What we have always seen, always since the very start in Africa, is that one poor person is doing absolutely everything. 5 people are doing absolutely everything. So this ties back to we have smaller agencies, more intimate teams. We don't have that level of specialization that we are seeing in the UK, in the USA, in Europe. In South Africa, of course, you just do everything, get it done. Right. And again, unfortunately, we're definitely seeing this year. Last year, technical role, vast majority. This year again, vast majority says, yes, I'm fulfilling the technical role. I implement campaigns by drafting and designing communication material, crafting content for different platforms, content publication, press releases, editorials, and distributing messages to stakeholders, doing the work. Vast majority says, yes, I'm doing that. Managerial role, I determine the stakeholders for platforms. I develop the communication plans and campaigns. I oversee the execution. Vast majority says, yes, I'm doing that too. Lastly, the strategic role. I do environmental scanning, preempting issues, deciding on the strategic direction of our communication campaigns. We translate the impact of the stakeholders to management. No surprise, vast majority is saying, absolutely, I do that too. So one person in communications in South Africa is doing everything. And then we can't help but wonder, why is time a big challenge when using AI, when measuring. We don't have time. Why? Because we're doing everything. We're not specializing in our roles. Okay, this is just all three of them together. Yes, yes, yes. One person doing everything. Now, the role of the practitioner. Okay, again, we can see they are doing everything. It's common for a younger practitioner to fulfill more than one role. They often end up in smaller agencies, in smaller in-house practices where they're the one man band. They have to do everything. But it is interesting to note that 75% of our respondents are aged 31 years and older. So we have these highly educated, these well experienced, these older professionals, all still not specializing, doing everything. Now let's look at our measurement evaluation practice. Now we know what they are doing and how they are practicing and more or less who they are. Let's get to the meat of it. How are they measuring? This year, we have communication agencies that are the most likely to have a formal measurement and evaluation process in place. 41% of agencies says, yes, we have a formal plan in place. Oresi, I'm sure this is going to come up later in the discussion. It tracks with what you're seeing. The brands and the agencies you're talking to are stepping up in terms of measurement, and we're seeing this reflected in the data. Awareness of the Barcelona principles are slightly up. Okay, they started at 56% in 2023. This year, that's 60%. 60% in 2024, sorry, and 64% this year. So we're still seeing that gradual uptick, which is very good. It's in a great large part thanks to the work that Resi and his team is doing in South Africa. I'm not going to lie. So we're continuing this upward trajectory of awareness of the Barcelona principles for the fourth year in a row now. Fantastic. Agencies are most aware of the Barcelona principles, then that's followed by in-house practitioners, and freelancers are the least on the awareness of the Barcelona principles. Could be because they're more isolated, they're less likely to attend industry events, they don't come into larger discussions often, but that's what the data is showing us. Now, it's good and well to know about the principles, but then you also have to do something with them, ideally. In 2023, 70% of those that were aware of the principles were implementing them as well. In 2024, last year, that number of the people aware but implementing fell to 64%. Okay. We thought at that point maybe the digital landscape is becoming too complex. Perhaps it's not sustainable to implement the principles in this rapidly changing environment. In 2025, it's climbing back up to 66% implementation, which is nice. It's almost giving me the idea that we're settling after 4 years into a more comfortable place where we are willing to experiment with these principles and look at what the global standard is and then aim, reach to compete with that. That's very heartening to see. Formal measurement evaluation practices. Does your PR department have a formal measurement evaluation process for determining the success of your PR campaigns? In-house practitioners, okay, sure, they're not doing bad. Freelance practitioners, communication agencies, right up there. Happy with that. Awareness of the principles, 64% this year says, yes, we know what the awareness principles are. We are aware of the Barcelona principles. When we did interviews this year, one very interesting thing came up, and that was that an agency said, in our interview, we asked, are you aware of the Barcelona principles? And they said, actually, before this, no, we weren't. But we went and we read them up, and then we realized we're actually checking all the boxes. We're actually implementing them, even though we didn't even know about them. How awesome is that? Because it shows that when your intent in what you're doing, your execution is strategic, then the Barcelona principles is obvious. Yes, of course we're following them. Of course we're doing that because they're strategic in what they are doing. They have high execution maturity. So the measurement maturity is there. So then obviously the Barcelona principles follows, even if you're not aware of that. That was a very interesting thing for me that came from the qualitative data. Okay. of those aware of the Barcelona principles, a large chunk of them is implementing. Fantastic. My favorite section of the whole study every year, what barriers are there to measurement evaluation? And of course, money, resources, time. Those are our all-time favorite top 3 culprits. What's keeping you from measuring and evaluating? We don't have the budget. We don't have the resources, such as tools, platforms, software, team members. And of course, we don't have the time because we're doing everything. Okay, it makes sense. There are other challenges as well. Some are struggling to prove the value of their activities to management. That's iffy for them. Lack of research skills in the team. Surprising since we have smaller teams with highly educated individuals. That might warrant some deeper research into that specific point. Gaining support from management every year. This features reporting to management on the value of PR, measuring the success of your activities, large challenge to people, reporting to management on my actual activities, not so much of a challenge. And a lot of people, some people said none of these challenges, which is fantastic for them. Right, but budget, resources, time, top 3 challenges. Measurement maturity, okay, holds hands like this with the Barcelona principles. The Barcelona principles require measurement maturity. What does measurement maturity mean? It means we're not only looking at how many likes a post got. We're not looking at whether a publication appeared or a piece appeared in a publication. Okay, we are looking at what is the effect. We're doing that so what part of communications. Measurement maturity creates that link between practice and your effectiveness. Okay, it enables reporting at outcome level, answering the so what questions. It shows true change in attitudes, opinions, or behavior. That's what mature measurement is doing. So in 2025, this year, we are seeing a fantastic increase in measurement maturity. Okay. Measuring outcomes is at the highest level ever. That is fantastic. 79% is measuring outputs this year compared to 70% last year. 57% are measuring outtakes compared to 53% last year, and 60% of respondents are measuring outcomes compared to 47% last year. That is big, massive, great, fabulous progress. Thank you. Okay. Output level measurement. Okay. We measure output such as media placements, audience size, reach, impressions, fans, web page hits, click-throughs, views. We expect the technical person to care about these metrics. A lot of them do care. Yes. Outtake level measurement. This one is looking a lot more flat. Okay. We measure outtakes of campaigns, message retention. Do our stakeholders understand our messages? Okay. A lot of people agreeing and being more neutral about this. Still some that strongly agree. A lot, unfortunately, that says, nope, we do not do this. What I think is happening is that they're skipping this part and then they're moving to outcome level measurement. We focus on measuring behavioral changes in our stakeholders, changes in their attitudes and opinions. Neutral, agree, and strongly agree are dominating. Okay, so this is, again, fantastic. Measurement maturity is hallmarked by strategic alignment in goals, but also in how channels are consistently and strategically measured as part of the overall communication strategy. So our channels that we're using cannot be measured in silos. Okay, everything must hold hands at the end in our measurement. 2 factors indicate the extent to which this is happening. Are you measuring tone and sentiment alongside the frequency of media? And how well is your social media measurement integrated into your entire communication strategy? Okay. This year, we're seeing a lot of people saying yes, strongly agreeing to tone and sentiment. Absolutely wonderful. It indicates high measurement maturity. Social media measurement. Do we measure social media consistently with other media channels? Yes, we are doing this, and it's at the highest ever since we started gathering this data. Are we setting clear goals for social media platforms? Yes, most people are. You can see most people agree with that. What's worrisome again this year is that there still are some people strongly disagreeing with this statement. They do absolutely not set goals for social media platforms. Not ideal, but at least they're honest. Social media measurement. Okay, are you measuring conversions, engagement, and conversations as well as coverage metrics like likes and reach? Yes, most of them are. Beautiful. Okay, now that we know we are we measuring maturely? How are we reporting on this measurement? Okay, once the measurement evaluation is said and done, reporting on the insights learned from measurement remains one of the most crucial pieces of the practitioner's road to the seat at the table, the very top, which we all want. Two elements we're interested in when reporting. Are they using AVEs still today? Are they reporting on return on investment? Okay. This year, we're seeing that AVEs is definitely starting to leave the conversation. Finally, it is dwindling. It's going out the door. Let's have a look. In 2022, when we started, we established our baseline. 63% of practitioners were using AVEs to report on their PR efforts. Okay. In the following years, we looked at are they using it as a standalone metric or as an index of metrics? Okay. Still, 63% were using it as part of an index of metrics. So that 63% became a pretty good benchmark. Okay. This year, AVEs are down to 36%. Fantastic. It was still 48% last year. 36% of people said yes, we're using AVEs. That is the best news for Amek. It's the best news for Oresti. It's the best news for Ornico. AVEs are on their way out. So we're seeing less use of AVEs every single year. Okay. I'm hoping we'll see them disappear entirely over the next few years. We'll have to keep doing the research to see, but clearly they're becoming less popular at least. Using AVEs as a standalone metric, a lot of people neutral, but we're seeing some good strongly disagrees, pretty much on par with the strongly agree. So it's split, but a lot of people feel strongly that they absolutely do not use AVEs as a standalone metric. That's very cool. Using it as part of an index, yes, we can see a lot of people doing that. Reporting on return on investment is still 64% since 2024. So that's fine. It's interesting to see we're becoming very nuanced in how we're attributing the ROI. Employee time is the biggest investment cost that we're factoring in. This is an important note because we're going to come back to this when you talk about AI. When practitioners are calculating return on investment to report to their clients, employee time is very important to them to calculate that ROI. Okay. Cost of listening monitoring software, ROI is still mostly measured in campaign specific income. There's the data, investment cost, employee time. There we see it way up there, right? And then also dominating campaign specific return, right? ROI as return income, NPR return income. Yeah. What are we looking at here? I've absolutely no idea what we're looking at here. I'm going to skip to the next slide. Now we get to the fun part, AI in PR measurement and evaluation. How are we using AI to bridge our gaps, to get over our challenges? The stuff that we say is bothering us. We don't have budget, we don't have time, we don't have resources. AI must be our answer, right? It has to be. Let's look. Huge surge in using AI in 2025. One thing that I just want to disclaim here, in the report that you're going to download after this, we're going to report on the AI dimensions based on the whole population. In the statistics that I'm giving in this specific presentation, I've looked at only the people actually implementing AI. What are their percentages? Okay, so it's going to differ a lot, but the trend is the same. Okay, Exploring the use of AI in PR in South Africa, this report keenly observes the South African baseline for how AI is used in PR measurement and evaluation directly or indirectly. That's what we're doing right now. Okay. First of all, this is what I just said. I'm only reporting on the percentage of the AI users. 66% of people have already started using AI to perform functions in their role in 2025. That is fantastic. This year, another 14% is adopting AI in their role for the first time, and 5% are planning to adopt it after this year. Good. Only 6% has no plan to adopt AI in their roles. Last year, it was 21% that said they won't adopt it in the last year. This year, only 6% says they have no plans to adopt it. So clearly, they're realizing that they don't have a choice. 80% of practitioners are now using AI for idea generation. Good, vast majority. The most popular reported uses for AI in 2025 are idea generation, content creation, and media research. Okay, this is literally what they said last year they were going to start using it for in that order. This year they said, yes, we are using it for that. So it's nice, when people do what they said they were going to do. Okay. The least popular use of AI this year is media and graphic generation. Interesting. Measurement and evaluation, and writing press releases. Least popular. Fantastic. When looking at the current versus planned used for AI, practitioners are planning to use AI more in the future for measurement and evaluation. So it's one of the least uses now, but they're planning to use it for measurement and evaluation. They're planning to use it for press releases, and they're planning to use it for task automation. Cool. Currently, practitioners who are using AI for measurement and evaluation are focusing on analyzing results, then media monitoring, and then sentiment analysis. This is quite cool because it shows us that where sentiment analysis would have been out of reach for so many small teams earlier, they can now use AI to actually do that sentiment analysis, which is making their measurement more mature. That's fantastic. They are using AI to plug their own shortcomings or the challenges that they experienced previously. Great. With time constraints being a major continuous barrier to measurement and evaluation, it's great to see that the biggest benefit practitioners are gaining from AI is saving time. 92% of AI users said saving time is a major benefit. 81% said that AI is making them more efficient, very cool, and 49% said it's reducing their costs. Okay, if we pitch that right next to our challenges, AI is crossing all of our challenges off the list for us. Okay. Using AI in practice. Okay. When did your team start using or plan to start using AI tools? 2024 was a banner year. Okay. And no plan, 6% this year. So vast minority says they have no plan to use AI. Fantastic. What are they using AI tools for? Idea generation, content creation. Good. What are they planning to use AI for? Still idea generation, media research, and measurement and evaluation. Fantastic. This is our current use versus our planned use. So we can see just across the board, people are planning to use AI more and more and more and more. This is a trend that we should take seriously. How is AI being used for measurement evaluation? To analyze results, to monitor media, to do sentiment analysis. Those are our top contenders. Very good because it means they're making our measurement more mature. Benefits: save time, improved efficiency, reduced cost. Way up there, much more so than accuracy, better results, not sure yet. Vast majority says we know what benefits we are getting and we like it. Right? That's it for me.
Fantastic, Tertia. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go straight to the questions from the group because there's two really important questions. I'm going to give the first one to Steph because she really understands this intimately. And I'm going to, what are the differences between outputs, outtakes, and outcomes? Steph, can you answer that question, and we'll go deeper in terms of that.
Yeah. I mean, those three terms come from something called the AMIC Integrated Evaluation Framework, and I've had the fortunate position of working with your colleague Francois on some AMIC-related training courses around that. So I'm just really happy to be able to answer this question. We call it the 3 O's, and as we saw actually in some of that data, some people kind of skip the middle bit, the outtakes, and focus directly between the outputs and the outcomes. And I like to simplify the 3 things as kind of see, what do people see, what do people think, and what do they do? So the articles, the press releases, the kind of things that people see, the reach and so on is what people can see. But the outtakes is actually what do they think? So that could be actually things like, what is the sentiment of the media coverage? Are they positively, are they likely to respond positively to what they see or negatively? What are the messages that are conveyed in the media coverage? Some of those words used in the content help to assess what the outtakes are. But I was so encouraged to see that increase in people and respondents focusing on those outcome metrics. What did people do? Because that really is the so what element of the question. And I think that it speaks to a need to not just look at one data set in isolation. Again, that's another point that's raised in the Barcelona Principles about looking at different media channels, not just looking at news coverage, but looking at social media performance, looking at perhaps how people search on Google. What do they do afterwards? We're all sitting there. I'm sure we all have the same behaviors. We sit there watching TV, we see an actor's, I know this is a kind of entertainment related example, but we see an actor's face that we recognize. And what is the first thing that we do? Oh, where do I know that person from somewhere? We Google their name. And similarly, one might do that if one is reached by a piece of content, elsewhere, and one wants to go and find out more. I've actually noticed in some of our advertising here in the UK that search is now almost the call to action for the people watching the adverts. We have some cancer research charities here, and their call to action is to actually go and search for a specific search term related to their particular campaign. So yeah, I would simplify those 3 O's if it's complex, and if you use the terms outputs, outtakes, and outcomes into what does people see, think, and do, and that often makes things a little bit easy for people to understand.
I think that's a good approach. See, the way you've looked at it, Steph. Thanks for that. Lebo, from your perspective, as a PR agency specifically, how are you finding, and specifically in terms of your agency, obviously data is important, insights are important, strategy is critical. How are you seeing the change in terms of evaluating and measuring communication change over the years? And what is your agency doing to foster this?
Sure. I mean, we are very fortunate that we haven't had to do AVEs in a very long time. So it's very exciting for us and for the clients that we work with, because that tells us that they measure and value different things. We have a simple ladder that looks at what is the business problem that we're trying to solve. I mean, we work with mining companies, for example. So we would look at if the problem is investor confidence, because around the issue of mine closure, that would be the business problem. And then we look at the outcome in terms of what do we want people to think, feel, and do differently. And then we look at the role of communications, looking at what are the stories, what are the channels, who are the stakeholders that we're going to look at for any particular campaign. And then we take that into the KPIs, and it's been how we have been measuring over the past couple of years, looking at what is our one business KPI, what is our one behavior or perception KPI, and what is our communication KPI, because that helps us to just be able to, as the results come in, we know that we've ticked off the business KPI, we know how we want people to feel and do, and we've met the communication KPI. And it ties back to what you said we should come back to, Tasha, about reporting to CEOs at CEO level. Because you're solving a business problem and you're giving them 3 key KPIs instead of giving them a whole horde of numbers that they can't translate, it makes the measurement so much easier. And that's how we do it.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. It's also making us, as an industry, taken more seriously at the end of the day, and I think that's what's important. Tendani actually asked an important question, and I'll answer some of it, but I think we'll also elaborate on it. Why is AVEs no longer preferred method for PR measurement? Cool question, Tendani, and let me give the two examples of what's happening in the media currently. So the RAF is in the media at the moment, not for very good reasons. Kat Matlala is in the media at the moment. Both of them have got huge AVEs. But what has that done to change the perceptions of the RAF brand at the end of the day? Nothing much. So the fact that they go back and they report that we've actually had huge AVEs means so what? At the end of the day, how does that ultimately help the brand? So a lot of the times, we're not saying don't use AVEs at all, throw them out completely, but actually use it in conjunction with a whole lot of other measurement tools around what we were talking about earlier: outputs, outtakes, and outcomes at the end of the day. And the question always is, what are we trying to achieve? As Lebo said earlier, what is the C-suite trying to achieve? Okay, what are their objectives, and how is that translated into the marketing department? And a lot of the times, it's not just about the PR side of it. It's paid, owned, earned, and shared. So what are the PR guys doing? What are the marketing guys ultimately doing? What are advertising doing? What are the social media guys doing? And I know that in our industry, we work in these absolute silos. Somehow we've got to put those silos together so that we know what's happening across the group or happening across the agencies, so that we're giving particular messages, not just looking at just the AVEs around that. Tertia, do you want to add anything around why is AVEs no longer preferred method for PR?
Well, it's as simple as it's not answering the so what question. If you put an AVE in front of an executive, they're going to look at the number, and that's where the conversation ends. Because it does not inherently mean more than that number. So it's very difficult to talk around AVEs, and if there's no conversation to be had, then why even bother?
Yeah.
It also doesn't answer what are we measuring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. And a really prime example is you might be wanting to go to a particular niche in a community paper. You're not going to have high AVEs there because that's the message that you want in that particular region. Putting it onto SABC or for that matter, putting it in Business Day, you'll get higher AVEs, but is that the target market that you're really looking at? So it defeats the purpose of what your objective is and where your message is.
Yeah, it's just so one-dimensional that you cannot extract meaning from it. That's why it must go.
It's also a metric that lacks transparency. I was really heartened to hear Lebo say that she hasn't used AVEs for a while. I probably haven't used an AVE for at least 20 years. And it's important to know that the rest of the world has also moved on, and it's really great that the region is also moving on. And I can't believe that we're still having this question about AVEs. But there's some data out there that demonstrates that whilst advertising costs continue to increase, audiences continue to fragment. So in a sense, if one is using an AVE, you're judging yourself against a metric which is going in the wrong direction to a certain extent, because it's getting more and more expensive to reach fewer and fewer people. And so again, that's another reason why AVEs shouldn't be a metric that you're trying to aspire to in the first place. Again, it doesn't talk to quality, but it's also you're just working in the wrong direction and swimming against a tide that's going in the wrong direction. So it's much better to focus on qualitative metrics too.
Yeah, We're also in the
Cool.
business of reputation management, and you can't measure reputation from just seeing a number, because you don't know who those people are, whether the message landed, whether their behavior changed or shifted. Whereas if you take into consideration all of these other, the outcomes, the outtakes, and the output, that's when you start seeing if the work is delivering on results.
Which follows on to the next question. In fact, I'm going to skip the one and go straight to John Boyd from Maropa, because it's exactly what you're saying, Lebo, is how do you measure behaviors, attitudes, and opinions? Do you want to take that on, Lebo, and then we'll go to Steph?
Sure, I can. There's various ways. There's surveys that we do, there's stakeholder engagements that we do. There's investor sentiment as well, especially if you work in the type of space that we do, where most of our clients are JSE listed. In that environment, when there is a behavior change, you know it immediately because the stock market goes in that direction. And then you can also see the positivity in the uptake, but it also works in the product space as well. And for me, that's why communications and marketing can work in silos, because if there's a product issue and PR is able to handle it, marketing and sales should be able to feed back into the PR in terms of, are we on the uptick? Is the market reacting? Is the product moving off the shelves? It's not moving, it's coming back. So I think that to answer this, I would say both from an agency and a corporate perspective, there needs to be a little bit more alignment in reporting and measurement between marketing, PR, and sales, because one feeds into the other.
Yeah. Before I get to you, Steph, I think that's absolutely true. The only reason why we do any communication, whether it's PR, whether it's advertising, whatever it is, it's actually to increase sales. Ultimately, I suppose it depends. If you're in a government department, it could be attitudinal changes and stuff like that. But if you're in a business environment, it's really to increase sales. That's the impact that you have at the end of the day. How we do it from a marketing perspective is trying to increase the reputation of the brand, trying to change perceptions, etc. And that's a key role that we have. Steph, anything you want to add in terms of that around behaviors, attitudes, and opinions?
Yeah, one has to think about, okay, those three keywords, behaviors, attitudes, and opinions, and then think about, okay, well, actually, who are the stakeholders? Because sometimes if your role is to focus kind of on media relations and the attitudes of the journalists, those in a sense are your stakeholders. And so one can measure the attitudes and opinions of the media stakeholders by assessing the sentiment of the media and the messaging and the quality of the messaging that they produce on your behalf. But it might be that your stakeholders are that next step along. It could be the target audience, it could be policy makers, it could be healthcare providers if you're in a healthcare space, it could be the general public, it could be niche audiences within that general public. So it's the way to answer that question is to explore, well, who are your stakeholders, and then the way to assess their behaviors, attitudes, and opinions will differ. And as I say, sometimes when one is looking at a general audience, beyond the journalist, beyond the media stakeholder, let's say, I return once again to perhaps more cost-effective tools than sometimes attitudinal research, stakeholder research, because I've had very few examples over my career where a big corporation has actually been able to invest in both the communications measurement element, but also bring in stakeholder analysis, market research. That's often the preserve of the big budgets and the big businesses. But there are some inventive ways that one can do this on a small budget. And I return once again to things like Google search. We put into Google, and Google, I believe, in South Africa is as dominant a search engine as it is over here in the UK. But we have access to things like Google Trends, Google Keywords, and so on. And that's a 20-year archive of attitudinal information around key target audiences, how people search for topics. You're only likely to search for a topic or a phrase or a keyword if you're aware of it. If you're aware of it, it's likely because communications has occurred to you and you become aware of something. So to be able to look at how search terms are changing over time, how perhaps the sentiment of those search terms are changing over time can be a really cost-effective way to look at and measuring attitudinal shifts over time, opinions over time of a target audience. And it's possible to kind of disaggregate sometimes who those audiences might be. I've done some work in the past for pharmaceutical organizations where one can look at the type of language used in these searches so that one can kind of tell whether perhaps it's more of a general population audience using those phrases, or it might be a more specific healthcare provider audience that might be using those phrases. So one can look at the words used in the search terms to assess who those audiences might be. So I'm always advocating for looking at those other more cost-effective forms of data that you can bring into your media data as well and triangulate with it.
Yeah. Can I add that
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, because I think it also impacts the way or your approach to PR or the way you do PR, because if your segmentation is so tight, then you move from a point of impact. So volume, not moving away from volume to impact, because you know who your stakeholders are, who you're communicating to, what language they speak, which media they use. So even if in your reporting there are probably 4 pieces of coverage instead of 20 with a huge AVE, you've reached the right audience, and then you can start measuring from and looking at the behaviors and attitudes and opinions from there.
Yep. I mean, our experience in terms of specifically with corporates, we as a brand intelligence firm won't necessarily have, and the agencies won't necessarily have that information or do that those kind of surveys. But corporates generally have, especially the bigger corporates, will have a brand health study that you can bring into the analysis and have a look at it. They can have a consumer study that is already done that we bring into the analysis at the end of the day. So those studies on specifically the bigger corporates are already done. Sometimes they're sitting on file 13, and it's crazy. So let's take it out of file 13. Let's bring it in and start aligning it with what we're doing from a campaign perspective. I think that's important. But again, as somebody has asked from an NGO, how do we do it? And you can, as Steph said, you can do it in a really much cheaper way. You can do social media questionnaires if you need to. You can ask your audiences. And yes, there's many different ways that you can actually do that. Those kind of surveys. That's not that cost effective, and that's why when I looked at the survey and they said, well, we're not doing measurement because of budget. I find that surprising, because it actually doesn't have to cost money. You can do something simple in terms of, and we always encourage the agencies that we work with or the corporates that we work with, is let's start simple. Something like top tier media. Okay, immediately an agency or a brand will think top tier media being Business Day, SABC, etc. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. What is the message? So your message, and again, I'm going to go back to the community space. Your message is that you want to actually have the majority of your communication in that community-based media. Let's measure that. Doesn't cost more money. It's actually, it's just being able to kind of understand it. So and seeing what are you trying to measure, and I think that's what's important. So it can be, like I said, just to reiterate, it doesn't have to cost money at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be expensive. But again, in a big corporate, yes, that spend money more on those surveys. Just a question around that the 40% to the C-suite, Tertia. How's that changing the perception of our industry at the end of the day? Because I think that's great. We've always wanted to have a seat at that table. How important is it? I mean, obviously it is important, but I mean, and why do you think to change that becomes absolutely critical.
Because it's all coming back down to strategy, right? As we said at the very beginning of this webinar, it's going to come down to strategy. And the thing is that communications in South Africa has forgotten one important element, and that is that it flows in both directions. So the communication professional, the in-house practitioner, for example, who's campaigning to be at that table, is often stuck at thinking, what can I get from that table? What information can I get there to make my job easier, better, faster, what have you? And in not many cases in South Africa are they asking, what can I add to that table? And that is where your absolute that is the goal, that is the main vein of this whole thing, is you can add. And I think that our practitioners need to have the confidence and the guts and the just the moxie to go and say, listen, I want to be here not because I want something, but because I want to add something. And then we can reestablish our two-way communications, where communications flows bottom up instead, as well as top down.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what, and I know it was a loaded question at the end of the day. I mean, that's what we find a lot of the times, that we're talking to those practitioners, and all of them want to be able to engage with the C-suite. And the only way we're going to engage with the C-suite is get to understand what they ultimately want and translate it within our communication spaces. Do you want to add to that, Lebo, from a PR perspective?
Yeah, I think that it's more, I mean, I agree absolutely with Tesha, but it's more about not communicating for the sake of communicating. And if you're not close to the C-suite, and if you're not thinking strategy, and if you're not thinking what business value and am I adding, then it makes it difficult for communications to end space at that table. So I think the key thing is to always ask yourself, what value am I adding? What am I bringing to the table when I'm invited? And that takes a lot of understanding corporate strategy. And like you said, Oresti, how then it then translates into communications. And then obviously ties back to the measurement.
Yeah, because then we've taken more seriously as an industry at the end of the day, because we're doing what the C-suite are looking at. And here's one from Thabo, from Tribeca. And I'm glad somebody started asking about AI, because it's always the elephant in the room, isn't it? Does AI positively or negatively impact PR lead strategies, like data bias? Steph, do you want to answer that question? Then I'll ask Tertia.
Oh my goodness, you've asked me an AI question, and I advocate for human intelligence over artificial intelligence all the way. I'm a Luddite. I'm in part of the UK called Lancashire. These were the kind of people that would resist the Industrial Revolution. And I feel like I'm following in their footsteps. So
I told you she's an out-of-the-box thinker, guys.
I'm not sure if I'm trying to think if I know how to answer this question. Does it positively or negatively impact PR lead strategies? I mean, AI is having both a positive and negative effect on the purpose of PR. I've been to a lot of conferences in the past few years talking about the rebirth of PR, thanks to AI, because PR feeds the content machine that AI is needing to be filled in order to generate its generative AI responses. So I'm not sure if I'm going down a particular path in this answer and not answering the question that was intended, but this is the way I understand the question a little bit, is the way in which things like press releases, things like listicles, things like comparisons between different competitors written in a quite overt style can be feeding the kind of positive responses that you may be wanting to surface in AI responses. But there's also something else to be said around what is happening with AI and how it's, I think, going to have an almost existential impact on our profession, in that the AI and the generative AI is stopping the clicks going to the media that we're trying to influence to write about our organizations. And so if this continues too long, those media won't be getting any clicks, and they rely on those clicks to power their advertising. And if there's no clicks, maybe people will stop advertising. And as we all know, none of us are paying for this media anymore. Where we used to go and buy a print newspaper, we don't, and we expect our digital content to be provided to us for free. So there is something existential happening in our industry, in the PR industry, in the content industry, that we perhaps need to be having serious conversations about. So it's all a little bit of a mess at the moment. It's both exciting and frightening at the same time.
Yep,
I heard answered the question.
we're at the end of the time, but I think, there's data bias with human engagement, as well as there'll be data bias from an AI perspective. So I think there can be data bias from both perspectives in terms of how we look at it. But again, it's how we ask that question and how we put in the prompts that become absolutely critical. But one of the WARC conversations that I was listening to 2 months ago was about synthetic data and synthetic respondents. And I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to discuss it because we finished. It's 10:01 already. But I think that's an interesting perspective on how the research industry is going to navigate this kind of biasness, this kind of data, and synthetic influences at the end of the day, which was in our social media landscape report, and the rise of those synthetic influences within our industry. But anyway, guys, we're at the end of this. We're at the end of this conversation. Thanks to everybody that engaged in terms of the questions. Thanks for the respondents that actually answered our survey. Really, we appreciate it so much. And to you guys on our panel, thank you for your input. Thank you. It's really inspiring, and thanks for helping the industry kind of grow and move forward and show that we actually are forced to be dealt with at the end of the day. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.